quick minute to introduce myself. I know Mahit did a phenomenal job of doing that, but I really want to kind of provide some context about my experiences, because that will give you an insight into, how I have for the last couple of years kind of operated, and how that's shaped my insight and my understanding, and a lot of the tips and tricks that I'm going to share with you today. So, greater part of the last decade, almost the last decade, I've spent in product management, and I've focused on these 4 key areas because these are my areas of interest. So I've focused a lot on consumer tech. I've worked across a spectrum of industries for marketplace and e-commerce businesses. And the last couple of years, as a lot of you would have noticed as well, subscriptions and membership models have gained a lot of traction. So I've also been fortunate to get opportunities to lead roles at companies that have these business models. So I started my career officially as a product manager at Flipkart, which is an e-commerce giant now owned by Walmart. I was leading their user engagement / retention charter. And in a lot of the companies that I walk you through as a part of my experience portfolio, I've had the good fortune of seeing these companies scale from a couple of 100,000 consumers to tens of millions to, in some cases, hundreds of millions. So I bring all of that experience and hope to kind of channel that in today's talk. I also worked at Shipt, which is an on-demand grocery service. So I led the consumer charter, reinventing the search experiences and a lot of other things, because grocery is very different from traditional e-commerce. That was the hypothesis. When Shipt got acquired by Target, I was tasked to lead the retailer / merchant product charter, set up the team, the vision, the strategy, and launched with a couple of 100 people across the team, same-day delivery for Target.com. I have worked at Narvar, which is a very sophisticated post-order enterprise SaaS company. Roughly, I think 70% of the American adult population interacts with Narvar flagship products, which I was leading. So I had access to not only the who's who retail partners in e-commerce, but also billions of customer impressions every month to learn from and gain insight on consumer behavior from. Most recent subscription-based company was Curology. It's a personalized skincare brand. I was leading product for them, in addition to product operations, product analytics teams. And then currently, I feel like my product life career has come to a full circle. I am back at Walmart, and I lead their omni-channel personalization efforts. So before I get into the content, I hope that during the Q&A or after the presentation or even post today's session, I can learn more about all of you and get to interact with all of you and learn from you. So the way I've prepped the session for us today, given that we have about 20-25 minutes to cover content, is in 3 parts. The first 5 to 7 minutes, I'd love to get into the first half of the session, which is around stakeholder management. So we'll take the first few minutes on really getting to understand our stakeholder groups. What are the staple ones? What are some of the adjacent ones? How it changes depending on the role you have. And get into, like I was saying, some tips and tricks and kind of my advice on how you can improve your stakeholder management. It's a process that I'm still doing. It can never be perfect, but there are iterations to help. And then I know the session talks about covering product strategy. I think that is a session in itself, and I'm happy to connect again on another session or after this one. But what I leave you with today is some food for thought on what are some basic and core do's and don'ts of a compelling product strategy. We won't be able to cover a lot of ground because this is such a meaty topic. But again, at least a third of the time today on that introduction. And then the last bit should be all interactive time for us. So let's jump in. Stakeholder management. And being true to myself as a product manager, I've decided to start with why. why this topic, why does it even matter to any of us, or even to me, and why I thought it'd be a good topic is I really think that as product managers, 50%, if not more, and I say this to everyone I meet on the product team, is people management, and that is stakeholder management. And I think that unless you really double down and believe to the core that this is an important and fundamentally an intrinsic part of the role we play at our companies, we will not be able to be effective at it. And so it I think the best practices to nurture relationships are really important, because unless we invest in building trust with our stakeholders, we will not be able to get that engagement. Unless we invest in building empathy and really understanding pain points of our internal stakeholders, we may or may not be able to replicate that to our external stakeholders like customers. And so I think that it's really important to invest in these relationships with stakeholders, because it is PMs are supposed to be orchestrators of different stakeholder groups. The second reason, and there's so many, but I'm just going to cover 3 today, is the fact that I think that you actually set yourself up for better success. Unless you have this little bubble here, I don't know if you can see my pointer or not, but unless you have alignment and shared ownership and shared motivation, it's going to be really hard for you to run that relay race, because then you're all going to be running in different tracks. So in order to have that shared ownership, in order to set yourself, your product, your service, your feature, whatever it is that you're working on, your charter up for success, and to actually be able to have a solid go-to-market and a faster execution, you need to invest in stakeholder management. Also, I think you are better able to position yourself and your product and your service when you have access to these experts in-house. And a rule that I always, or an insight I continue to remind myself of, is there is no one person who has answers to everything. And so we as product managers don't need to know everything, but we need to know who to go to and how to get access to those insights. So this is a really important part. Your stakeholders are a really important part of setting you up for success. And then the third reason, the kind of the crux of why product management, in my perspective, exists today in the shape and form that it does, is to deliver on business value. And unless you have means to effectively make decisions, unless you have a good way of getting and driving alignment, unless you don't have this mentality of it's all of us against the problem, not you against me, when you have disagreements, you are not going to be able to tackle those big bets. You are going to be spending your time going back and forth between stakeholders. So investing in stakeholder management, I think, is really crucial for that long-term success and for that business value, for you and your team to add business value. Having said that, I am now going to get into something that is typically more helpful for aspiring or early PMs, but nonetheless, the landscape is changing so fast that I think this will be helpful for everyone on the call. So, you sit smack here, starting with the product. You find yourself in this group. Stakeholders that you typically work with a lot, day in and day out, are your design and engineering partners. It's kind of like this inner circle, and the circle represents that. But there's another thing that I wanted to put smack in the middle of this triad, is your customer. So without actually being in the room, the customer is probably your most important stakeholder group, and product, in conjunction with design and engineering, are supposed to be customer advocates. So product design and engineering, that triangle kind of represents the triad, and this will be your inner circle for most traditional PM roles. Then as a product manager, we are supposed to be the connective glue, the connective tissue of the org. You will have a fair bit of managing across and managing up. And so that was kind of the flavor I decided to take for this representation of stakeholder groups. Is you'll have a bunch of stakeholder groups you have to manage across, and there'll be a bunch of stakeholder groups, not as many as the left bucket, that you'll have to manage up to. And needless to say, but they require certain nuances in the skill sets that you need to manage up and across. So staple stakeholder groups in most companies, you'll have a marketing group you'll work really closely with, you'll have an operations and a logistics team you'll work really closely with, you'll have data and analytics. These are stakeholder groups you'll find in most companies, big or small, startups or not. Again, depending on the kind of, now we're getting into industry specific and company type, but I wanted to shed light that sometimes in addition to operations and logistics, you have a fair enough large sized in-house or even outsourced customer support team. Great source of customer insights and trends and patterns. In some companies, especially up and coming telehealth companies, for example, you will have a whole group of internal experts. Like at Curology, for example, we had dermatologists in some case, medical providers in some case. And so you'll have this internal stakeholder group that you're building tools and efficiencies for. Again, depending on the industry, you would have fairly large, mid to large size legal and finance departments in case it's a regulatory product or something that has a lot to do with compliance, and you will have legal and finance stakeholders. You would have program management or product ops, which are delivery champions in the company. So you have that stakeholder group. And sometimes, for example, at Narvar, you would collaborate with sales and customer success and professional services teams, which are in charge of the B2B side of the B2B2C company that you're working with. So these are kind of groups of stakeholders that you'd find across most SaaS and most traditional companies that have product teams. There could be many more. Managing up, of course, you would get to interact with the leadership team, the C-suite. In some cases, if you are a part of companies that have our multi-sided marketplaces, for example, at Shipped, I was managing up to a lot of our partners, to a lot of our retail merchants. And then lastly, depending on, again, your seniority, if you're in an executive role or have a board-facing role, you would also be managing up to board members. So this is kind of the landscape of the usual stakeholder groups you'd be working with, and your approach would largely stay the same. And in principle, it's about aligning goals with each of these stakeholders, but it's good to have a 30,000 feet on who you'd be working with and how. So again, there's so much that I would have loved to share, and this can definitely be an ongoing conversation should you reach back out after the presentation. But I wanted to kind of crystallize the four main things that I think are key when I think about effective stakeholder management and best practices around it. So I've introduced this both in teams that I have managed, but also as a quick rule of thumb for myself of, am I doing A, B, C, and D? So hopefully it's quick recall for all of you. A is, are you giving your stakeholders a seat at the table? And in order to do that, everybody needs to be on the same page. They need to share the same vision. They need to be aligned on the goals. And so it's everything to do with alignment. So I constantly ask myself, are my stakeholders feeling that they have not only access to a seat at the table, but then with that access, do they feel like they are aligned? The second thing that I always try to keep my eyes and ears on the ground for is, am I investing in those relationships? Am I building trust? Because without building trust, building extraordinary products is going to be a really big challenge, or it's going to be untenable for you. Even if you've done it once, replicating it is going to be really hard. So in order to join forces, it's really important to align and build trust. How do you do that? Variety of ways, but one of the most important ones is constantly communicating. And that communication, changes over the life cycle of your relationship and changes over the life cycle of your product development process. But essentially, how do you use communication and information that you're federating out through that communication to enable your stakeholders to either make better decisions, to provide you insight, to stay in the loop, to have a voice, to be heard. And the last is, when you deliver on your promise, especially when that promise is to deliver value, you will get into this really beautiful universe, or a beautiful place with your stakeholders, because you will be seen as somebody who not only orchestrates well, but takes everyone along on the journey and delivers on the set promise. So A, B, C, D, always align, always build trust, always communicate, in fact, over communicate if possible, and always deliver on your set promise. This is going to help you build credibility with your stakeholders. So I'm going to share some guidance on things that have worked for me. And this is not a laundry list and not a checklist by any means for you to go and, check, start to kind of cross out and do all of these all at the same time. These are things that have helped me, for the past couple of years in different ways. So I've not always used them together, but a lot of these in different situations have come together to help me establish credibility and establish a rapport with my stakeholders. So I'm going to share all of the things that have helped me, and feel free to kind of pick and choose the ones that you think, given the context of your role, of your company, of your stakeholders, of the state of the relationship that you share with them, the ones that will make most sense for you. So it's kind of like a flywheel. Has 4 main sections. So my tips on how to improve your stakeholder collaboration are in 4 parts. The first is, how do you actually invest in processes that are going to help you add rigor? Processes, when implemented right and implemented for the right reasons, always add discipline and rigor, and take away a lot of the anxiety of, okay, when will I get access to X? Okay, when will I get to be a part of a forum to do Y? And so we'll talk about some of those. We'll talk a little bit about engaging with people and those nurturing, relationships and trust-built relationships with stakeholders. A few exercises that I have, tended to do over the last couple of years to align some that have been more useful day to day, and some that have been more useful in tricky situations where there is a lot of misalignment. And then the last one is this, smaller bucket, but as you are investing in building empathy for your stakeholders, how do you do that in a loop, so your stakeholders also empathize with how difficult it is for product managers to prioritize, how difficult it is for us to plan and repivot, or for us to say yes or say no. So let's talk about the first bucket. Processes for collaboration. Something that I've introduced now in a couple of companies I've been a part of is product reviews. So product reviews could be of different types, but the most common ones are pre-launch product reviews, go-to-market product reviews, and pre-design product reviews. So what that means is that when you have an idea, how do you start to, like I mentioned a few slides ago, take people along the way, the key decision makers that you have, or the key experts that you think should be involved in an idea that you or your team have. How do you involve them at the right time with the right kind of information? So happy to talk more about the session, just keeping stock of time, but product reviews where you get the right people in the room to collaborate and to get their feedback on key projects, key initiatives is proven to be really helpful. It helps stakeholders feel like they're a part of it, and it then kind of helps them feel like it's a shared goal, and helps rally the teams around it. Design critiques is another way that's commonly used. If you do not have a design team or a formal design team or a large enough design team, product managers can go ahead and take initiative to set these up, because it's really important that you get feedback on big initiatives for design at the right time as well. Planning, having a set cadence, whether it's quarterly or monthly, it just all depends on the company, but I have seen planning together and then having check-ins of again a regular cadence, whatever cadence fits the bill for you at your company, is really important to keep your stakeholders in the loop. So this is more fostering collaboration, building relationship, tapping into their insights, tapping into their expertise. Here you're kind of now overarching theme is, how do we keep them in the loop? How do we make sure we are executing on the C part of the ABCD? And sometimes I have seen, enablement, and I've typed trainings here, but any process that can help you enable your stakeholders, that helps you set up the team for success. So think of when you're, going to market with a big launch. How do you train people? How do you train the customer support team well in advance, so that when your product launches, they are enabled and empowered with the right set of answers to commonly asked questions, etc. So these are some tips that have worked for me in terms of collaborating on product development. On the people engagement side, of course, needless to say, one-on-ones. I have been a part of a few companies where the culture varies from the traditional, hey, let's catch up for a regular one-on-one. But I would always suggest for folks to meet, for example, your inner circle, your triad, very regularly. Always conduct some kind of feedback loops, whether in the form of surveys, on how the product team, your team, is operating, what can be done better, how can the product team enable the success of the stakeholders. And then for large feature launches, traditionally, even at Flipkart, back in the good old days, we would always dog food with our stakeholders. So our business stakeholders would have very nuanced feedback, which is very, very different from the lens that we as product managers would take. Sometimes our design partners or our analytics partners or our data partners or our engineering partners would have such different perspectives. So dog fooding is another way to really engage and start to build connections with key stakeholders. And again, having forums, channels, all of those work. Alignment exercises, making them a part of the planning process. And when I say this, it is not, here's the plan, what do you have to say? Go back and take a step back and say, what are the problems? And we'll talk about this a little bit when we get to the strategy slide, but make them a part of the planning process, the problems prioritization process. Sometimes it's really, really, if nothing else, cathartic for stakeholders to come in and participate in blue sky brainstorming. A lot of good ideas come in through brainstorming exercises I've done in the past. And one note here, the reason why I've loved to do the journey mapping and the blue sky brainstorming exercises with stakeholders for alignment is that when stakeholders come in, I think it's the job of the product managers to not weigh themselves down with this perceived notion of, as a product manager, I have to be the origin of all the ideas, all the great ideas. That is actually not true. I think that you are supposed to be the aggregator and the person who picks the right ideas and takes them to fruition. But you don't always have to be the ground for originating the best ideas in the company. What you have to do is get those ideas, assimilate them, understand them, aggregate them, and then pick the right ones. And so blue sky brainstorming is a great way of doing that. Empathy building, the first one is the one that I kind of like swear by. It's worked for me and a couple of companies I've been a part of, which is this trade-off brainstorming. So when you do these planning exercises or even blue sky brainstorming exercises, sometimes I extend that and take the last 15, 20, 30 minutes to say, okay, everyone in the group, on the call, in the room, pick the three. So the brainstorming exercise had no constraint. It said, should we not have any constraints on tech resources? Should we not have any time and money constraints? Here are the list of great ideas that we would want to execute on. But now I'm giving all of you the authority and the chance to pick the three, knowing that we have constraints, which are the top three ideas that you would pick. And you would actually start to see lists of 2021, a pattern emerging of everyone kind of struggling with prioritization. And so I've seen people say, oh my God, how do you do this every week, every month, every quarter? How do you say no to people? And it really helps these stakeholders from different parts of the org empathize with the roles, the difficult positions that product managers are in every now and then, saying no, pushing back, or picking the top priorities. A, so it's helpful for that. And B, you will start to see whether people have suggested 20 ideas, 2 ideas, 37 ideas, it doesn't matter. You start to see when you really add in this constraint of we can only do 2 or 3, which ones would you pick? You start to see this pattern, which is why I love doing it as an alignment exercise. And an empathy building exercise is then kind of the cream rises to the top, and you'll start to see across your stakeholder groups, when people start aligning on the top problems to solve for, your alignment, that foundation to now start to build alignment on that plan will become easier. And collaboration as a circle will become easier because they have that context and you've taken them along the journey from the beginning, or the near beginning. Just again, keeping stock of time, I am going to go into this last bucket, which is, again, I caveat to say it's an introduction, because this is a very, very meaty and a very crucial and a very important topic for product managers. So what I'm going to do is cover just a couple of minutes of what I think are tenets of a good strategy. And during the course of this conversation on this one slide, kind of the do's and the don'ts, and it'll give you some insight into how I think about good practices now for an effective product strategy. So a lot of people I have seen, probably more new than more experienced PMs, but they think that a good strategy is a set of great solutions. I disagree wholeheartedly. I think that it includes that, but that isn't the crux of a great strategy. And I'll tell you why. I think that a good strategy covers in depth, not solutions, but proposes the problem statements that you should go after. So even if your solutions may change down the line because you've hired a new team, you've launching in a new market, you have new leadership in place, or etc., your solutions may change for a variety of reasons, but if you've picked the right problem statements, your strategy holds. So when you focus on problem statements, I think personally that the strategy is nothing but a great set of hypotheses, and those hypotheses are around what we think as a product group are the key problem statements. So there could be 100 problem statements, business problem statements or consumer problem statements or internal stakeholder problem statements. This is a series of hypotheses that prioritizes those key problem statements, right? Not just that, it allows the team and the larger org to focus. Because what a good strategy does, it focuses. Any strategy which tries to be everything for everyone or go after every problem statement is probably biased to fail or is set up not in a great way to succeed. So what a good strategy does is it focuses on your top or key problem statements. And what it does is that it enlists a plan, or it articulates a plan that allows you to focus on solving these key problem statements. And that is where your solution comes in. So your strategy shouldn't be anchored on the solutions. It should be anchored on focusing on the right problem statements. Another thing that's really important in a good strategy is having the right North Star metrics to measure success. Because you can never really measure progress or measure success unless you have the right tools, of course, in your hand, but the right metrics to do that. So a very good strategy will have clear North Stars. It won't have 10 metrics, it'll have 1 or 2 or 3, whatever the number, depending on, again, the business and the scale and the size and the scope. But it has very clearly articulated North Star metrics. A good strategy, for the most part, helps you, or in most cases, will always have this element of differentiation. How are you building innovative products, or how are you innovating or iterating on the competitive advantage that you have today? So you are extending your reach. So you're continuing to build a defensible moat for your business or for your product and service. So good strategy always considers that. A good strategy will only be good on paper if you do not have alignment across stakeholder groups, which is why that first part of the session was so key to walk through before we came to this, because when it comes to execution, motivating and rallying the teams is really important. And that's where your stakeholders will come in. And when you tie the left side of the screen with the right side of the screen, you'll see that a good and an effective product strategy is not only a great plan, but it's a well-articulated, a clear, crisp plan that is very, very well defined and is compelling. And so if I had to kind of just summarize this in as few as possible words, I would say that, strategy, a good product strategy is a compelling plan. Compelling because it allows you to inspire the larger org. It allows you to articulate clearly what your goals are, how you're going to measure success, and what the plan to solve those key problems are. So it states clearly the problems, but also the plan to solve those problems in a way that it builds your defensible moat, it extends your lead. And so in essence, it's delivering business and customer value. That, to me, is the foundation of a good product strategy. If you were to kind of put all of this to task and to make this slightly more actionable, I'll share as the final slide for today a basic strategy framework that I always find myself defaulting to whenever I am whiteboarding and doing strategy for my teams. The framework that I like to use is what, so what, and what next. And basically the what is what we spent a good amount of time in the previous slide talking about, which is problem statements. What are your key core problem statements? Not the solutions. Always start with the problems. Why are those problems important? So what if those problems exist? Because not all problems are pervasive. Not all problems need to be solved. And solving a lot of problems may or may not add value. So why are the specific problems that you have made a part of your strategy important? And why are they bang for the buck? Why are solving these problem statements going to impact the right metrics, the metrics that the company at this point cares about? So how do these ladder up to the company's strategy? Kind of falls into the second bucket. What next? So you have clearly well-researched, well-thought through problem statements, you've identified them, you know that somebody needs to care about them, which is that second bucket of so what, you know the potential impact of solving those problem statements, the metrics and the needle that you're going to move. And then the what next is the plan of attack. What are the big bets you're going to take? What are the foundational things that you're going to do? What are the incrementality features that you're going to have to build? So a mix of these three things is going to be a part of your plan of attack. That's the general strategy framework that I typically start with, and then it starts to take more shape and gets more granular as the exercise proceeds. But this is where I typically start. So I wanted to share this, and I know that I am probably a little over time, so I'm going to thank everyone for their attention and happy to take any questions.
So Bani, the first question probably relates to the last slide. So an attendee is asking, could you please give an example or a few examples of good problem statements? Right, I believe in products, it's very important to articulate problem statements. So just a few examples would be handy.
That's a great question. And of course, my memory isn't working super fast right now. Let me think of a recent exercise I'd done at Curology, where one of the things that we noticed, again based on data and qualitative and quantitative and all the different ways to get feedback, one of the things that stuck was the fact that when you are applying skincare products, it's really important to remember to do that. And so one of the key problem statements, or one of the key customer pain points that I remember as being a part of the strategy exercise was the fact that how do we enable our customers, our consumers, to remember, to actually remember and build that discipline to apply those products, because the products in themselves are supposed to work. But how do we, without being in the same house and sharing that bathroom space, which is impossible or scalable or cost effective, how do we build that discipline? And so the problem statement was, how do we enable a routine? How do we enable a routine for uh, a majority of our consumer base? How do we enable them to remember to apply their products at the right time, in the right cadence, and the right number of times in a day? And so that was a problem statement that then allowed us to define um, solutions around that.
Yeah.
Great question.
Okay. So folks, you can, keep questions coming in, or you can, ask your questions directly. So at this time, we have unmuted all the attendees. So if you have a question, you can raise your hand. You can feel free to ask away. And otherwise, you can type those out in chat and I can shepherd the questions for you. And Bani, at this time, we have approximately 20 attendees. So, well-attended session. Thank you. Questions, please. So as we are waiting, Bani, I did have a question. So thank you for that ABCD framework. That's a good aid to memory. My specific question is, in that, is there an overlap? For lack of a better word, there is often no clear cut okay, this is in the A phase or this is in the B phase, or that we are building or we are aligning. Sometimes we are doing those things in parallel, right? So my question really is, what nuances to watch out for? What, as we are building alignment, what could we be looking at the next step, right? I mean, okay, this is alignment is done now. How about we move to the next step of building out a relationship, right? Any suggestions there?
Yeah, I think that's a great call out, Mahip. I don't think that these are, I'm just going to look for that slide and anchor us to it. I don't think that these are, supposed to be done one after the other in sequence. I think that these are parallel activities, especially as you start to go from being a PM to a senior PM to a principal PM to a director to senior director, right? These are activities across different portfolios where on one initiative, you are actually in the execution phase and you're delivering value, you're measuring, you're learning, you're repivoting. And in some cases, there's a strategic project where you're just starting to align. And so it won't, even in a given initiative, I think that you would have different stakeholder groups, for example, that would enter the process at different times. So customer support may not be a part of the initial, say, brainstorming process or initial product review process. So you are only going to be aligning them maybe 3/4 of the way in when you're doing your enablement, go-to-market planning. And so align is also happening along the way, as is investing in relationships, as is communicating, as is delivering. So I think this is just a rule of thumb that I like to use, and you'll have
The
to
9th at 8:30, at 10:30.
Did that help, Mahit?
Yes, it absolutely did. It absolutely did. And my takeaway is, like with everything in product, it's in parallel, right? There is no
Yes.
defined loop there, or no structure there. There are lots of cross connections.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
so Sergio had a question around whether the slides for this presentation would be made available. So what we typically do is we curate this session and then we put it on our website as a video, because it's not just audiences in the US which are attending this webinar. audiences in the UK. We've had members from Africa as well, lots in Asia and in Australia. They view it. So we make the presentation live roughly by the end of this week, right? So Sergio, the content will be available, and Bani will be sharing her contact information after the presentation. So feel free to exchange notes with her. And then we did have a few questions coming in. One of them says, what does a PM day-to-day look like? Right? If there is anything like a typical day in the life of a PM, do you spend more time in meetings aligning and gathering feedback, or do you spend more time with your own brainstorming, reading, doing research, creating PRDs? I mean, do you have a typical day, and what does it look like?
That's a very good question, and a loaded one also, in the sense that there isn't one right answer to this, but I'll share my perspective on it. So your day-to-day changes a lot, as depending on, again, the role you play in the company, how large the product team is, whether there are more than 2, 3, 4, whether you're a senior PM or a PM or a principal PM or a true PM, it changes because a couple of things change. So think of this as a matrix. When you are kind of a new PM, or just have a few years, what you're trying to do is you're trying to learn some of these best practices and apply them and learn. You're also developing and evolving as a PM. So you're learning a little bit of your style, the industries that interest you, whether you want to be a data or a platform PM, whether you're more interested in consumer, for example. I love consumer products and I love to be a consumer PM. Do you want to be a PM that is vertically focused or horizontally focused? So you're figuring some of these out when you are in those first few years of your product experience. And that is when Victoria, yes, just wanted to see the name. That is when, Victoria, you will do a lot of kind of building your best practices, your templates, and learning about PRDs and how do you do agile and how do you do good brainstorming sessions and how do you do design critiques. And those are the things where you will focus a lot on. In terms of scope, your scope will be probably one part or one charter within a product. When you move on to say senior and principal PM roles, which are both typically IC roles in most companies, at least that I've interfaced with, your scope will expand. Now your PRD and brainstorming and these best practices, etc., will kind of be like second nature for you. And what you are going to be focusing on is a larger portfolio, working with larger stakeholder groups, slightly higher visibility, closer to the managing up piece. So you've done a lot of the managing across. Now you probably get into, for the first time, managing up a lot more. And your skill set will change a little bit here because the nature of the things that you will work on will also change. Your metrics will be slightly more kind of high visibility, high urgency. Your problem statements will be a slightly more ambiguous. So you're not really just getting something to deliver on and run with it. In most cases, you're actually figuring out what that solution should look like. When you move into group PM roles, for example, you are now not only operating as an IC, you are a player coach. So you are managing people in a lot of companies as a GPM, but also contributing and adding a lot of value as an IC. So again, your scope will expand. Now you have product management and, for the first time, possibly people management. And what you're doing now is you are creating scope and again, as you keep kind of progressing up the ladder, now you're not only taking scope and running with it as a PM. As a senior PM, you are getting larger scope. As a GPM, director, senior director, you're creating scope for the company. You're actually identifying problem statements that probably nobody is talking about. And here is where you're not just focusing on execution and strategy and operations. You are a key part of company strategy and business strategy, and therefore product strategy also. So it changes and it evolves. And at the executive level, just to leave you with that final thought, now you are responsible for 10xing the people on your team. So as a GPM, director, senior director, you're probably 10xing things on your charter, but as an executive at that highest level as a CPO or EVP or whatever that might be, you are then 10xing on your team. So it's very different, and things will start to become second nature for you as you progress along the ladder. So your day-to-day might look very different in different companies.
Okay. Thank you, Vani. So Dana had a few questions, and let me try to organize them and try to make sense out of them.
Sure.
I believe the general area in which they fall under is that for newbie PMs or for PMs who are just getting started or folks who are just getting started in the product manager role, what blogs or books could they refer to, or what organizations could they be a part of that will help them in their career? And number two is, what sort of tools could they refer? What sort of templates could they look at so that they can look at those as a reference, maybe to create PRDs, maybe to create white papers, right? Or to write user stories. So I believe those are the two general areas. I mean, Dana, please let me know if I'm correct. Those are the two general areas where her questions fall under. A is getting guidance, and B is what sort of tools or templates to refer to.
You summarized very perfectly.
Thank you.
Okay, great questions, Dana. And without having a lot of context on kind of what you're, whether you're an aspiring PM or just getting started, or where in the trajectory you are. I'll give you
currently a product owner, and I'm aspiring to. I feel like there's like roadblocks. Either you have the PM experience to get the PM roles, or you don't have the experience and you're kind of fluttering through trying to see how to get the experience in order to get the role. So I'm just trying to transpose that for like a person that's aspiring. How can I grow my own skill sets and transpose my product owner role day to day in order to, mimic some things. Like, for example, I do roadmaps, but I don't do the whole competitive analysis part of it. So I'm not able to get that kind of experience. So I'm just trying to glean from that perspective. And thank you so much for allowing me to speak.
Sure. Okay, great. So I would say that, again, it depends on whether you have access to this opportunity at your company or not. But say you do, I would love would suggest and strongly recommend that try shadowing a product manager at your company, and try to see from, say there's a project starting where you are enlisted and you are a part of that core team as a product owner, but you have a product manager that you're going to partner with, who's your stakeholder on the team, where if you could shadow and see, because the reason why I kind of not hesitate, but I don't typically think it's ideal, is pointing people towards a set list of tools or templates, etc. And there are a lot of them. I can do that after the session, type that out, but there isn't one repository that's going to give you that, because every company, Dana, I have been through, I have not been able to carry my own templates, whether it's a strategy layout or it's a PRD layout or it's a team structure, guiding principle, etc. What I do carry forward are my principles, are kind of the basic and the core things that I have shared with you today that are very intuitive and simple, that I've been able to carry forward. So that is the reason why I say shadow a PM on your team, because every company does things very differently. And so the way, if you compare PRDs across 5 startups or 50 startups, you will see 50 flavors. So I would recommend that you do that to see how it works in your company, and then try to lean in on how you can do that, and how a part of that is something that you start to acclimatize and familiarize yourself with. On a generic level, trying to kind of upskill or trying to build skills that you think are necessary as a PM and that you think you need to double down on. I think there is a lot of content out there. I would just simply Google search. There are tons of PRD templates. There are tons of wireframing templates. There are tons of strategy templates. But I think it is best seen in action. If all of those things don't work, I would say find a mentor and let them guide you. I think that is another way of, just hustling and finding somebody who will invest in you, and really kind of then you knowing where your skills lie and the ones that you want to develop, this person can invest and guide you appropriately, whether a mentor within the company or outside. So that would be my advice to your set of questions.
Thank you.
And Bani, if I may, please take the spotlight away, steal it away for a quick 30 to 45 seconds. Dana, that's one of the reasons why, communities like Products That Count exist, right? It is to bring practicing experts, and bring them in touch with people, with aspiring PMs like you, or, folks who want to know more about product management. Is this something that they would like doing? Or they have been product managers for a while, but they are trying to, polish their skills. We do have lots of resources on our website, right? So feel free to go visit our website, Products That Count. You can connect with me, as I'm the head of chapter for San Francisco. I can make more introductions. We have a very active community. And then feel free to ask around. Feel free to ask around and connect with people on, who are in a similar industry sector as yours, as to what could be some of the templates, or what could be some of the best practices for PRDs. And to second Bani's point, I have yet to see, one PRD template or anything, outlast a particular product. I think once the product changes, the audience changes, the stakeholders change, the needs of that community will also change. So what may have worked for one set of stakeholders is not likely to carry forward to the others, right? So I would definitely, second what Bani said. So happy to answer other questions, and questions are coming thick and fast. And I know we are probably a little bit over time, but Bani, if you can stay on to answer just a couple more.
Sure.
Victoria had a question. She says that she has consulting and technical project management experience, right? Those are definitely relevant to product management. But what other skills could she focus on as a wannabe product manager? So let's say you have the consulting know-how, you have the technical project management know-how. What other skills should she focus on?
So Victoria, again, happy to kind of extend the conversation after the session, but I think that there are a couple of core skills that I look for. Again, this changes depending on the role, depending on the seniority, depending on the industry, etc. But in principle, the things that I look for in great PMs, or when I'm hiring new PMs or folks that are new to product management, is the attitude. And by attitude, I mean, do you have the potential to seek unbiased answers? Do you get wedded to the problem and not the solution? What is your problem solving technique? I think something that your consulting and project management experience will lend well to is communication. stakeholder management, building alignment. Those pieces, I think you probably have built expertise around. And so those might, come naturally to you. But the pieces around problem solving, the pieces around really being a great executioner and a great operator is something that consulting may or may not provide you um, as opportunities, right? Because when you consult, you present and you share recommendations, but you are not always the person to execute. So execution might be a skill set, or being a great operator might be something you want to invest in. And then the last thing is, again, maybe not true for all consultants, but something that consulting may not provide you a lot of opportunities with is really owning the outcome. So again, when you make recommendations and you present, you've done all the legwork to arrive at the right solution to that problem or that business case, but that's where your ownership kind of stops. And I've seen a lot of kind of budding PMs also fall into this trap that shipping is a win. Shipping is not a win to me unless it moves the needle. So when you own the outcome, and this is it isn't really a skill, it's a mindset, but a mindset that allows you to, have a lot of tremendous amount of, a sense of ownership. And I think that's something that I really like to glean and see. If you have great sense of ownership, you can, be a great stakeholder manager. You can invest in people. You have a passion for the product, and you have, good communication skills. You can articulate well and get your point across. Then I think that that counts for great potential. So I would invest in those areas.
Thank you, Bani. And the last question comes from Sergio. So he's asking that of the various activities that you talked about, right, the ones to promote collaboration with the stakeholders, in your experience, are there any which were better than the others, right? I mean, and of course, your experience could be relevant to the industry that you have been, but and Sergio agrees it's a tricky question, and Sergio, I agree with that. I mean, it's very difficult to pick only one of those or a bunch. But Bani, any recommendations on activities which work better than the others?
So I'm just on the slides, or the beginning of the slides. I think that something that's worked for me a lot is these product reviews, and you can give it whatever flavor and have it conform to whatever forum best practices you have in your company. But I really think that having these phases and getting the right folks a seat at the table and tapping into their expertise at the right time as you're building for a big initiative is really helpful. It allows for a lot of risk mitigation because you are actually planning with folks who are now going to be the face of this launch. So think of the customer support teams, think of the sales team if you're in a SaaS company, think of the customer success team if you're in a SaaS company, etc. Right? So these have worked really well, and it counts for a great go-to-market experience in my experience. On the people engagement side, having some way, some forum or some channel, whether it's through a one-on-one, whether it's through a weekly sync, whether it's through a Slack channel, whatever works for you, having a place where their voices can be heard in a known judgment zone, I think is really important. On the alignment side, the blue sky brainstorming coupled with that trade-off exercise has worked really well for me. So those are the 3 or 4 things that would be my top picks.
Thank you, Bani. Folks, so that is what we had time for today. Bani, thank you again for a very practical session. I think the the takeaways from today's session are extremely practical. I got a refresher on some of those, so I could, I have to thank you for that. So folks, in true product management spirit, we measure what we do. We would be following up the session with a survey. Please do fill it out. It helps us figure out how we are doing in bringing you, quality speakers. It's welcome feedback for the speakers themselves as well. So, strongly encourage you to fill out that quick survey. And with that, I'll hand it back to Reese. So thank you so much for attending, folks. It was a great audience. Thanks so much for the thoughtful questions.